Earth as a storehouse of memory and its influence on human life and fate. Those of you who have already completed the fourth main course and are familiar with the structure of the Karma Zero lens, if there are any here who already know this technique, are aware that the Karma Zero lens is the primary structural matrix which, in essence, represents our presence within the realm of Earth. It is, in a sense, our registration, a module and matrix of our consciousness, integrated into the general space of Earth. And Earth perceives us not by our physical body, no, not by what we happen to be doing on Earth, also no. Rather, it perceives us specifically through this matrix that we possess. The Karma Zero lens contains information about all our past incarnations and, naturally, about our bloodline connections. It also records the experience of the causal body up to the present day. It holds the entirety of our experience. Thus, this matrix recognizes us not by our physical manifestations, but through the traces we leave behind and everything we carry within us. And Earth recognizes us in precisely the same way. It is important to note that it is from Earth, and not from anything else, that a person receives their primary level of rights in this world. So Earth, and therefore the structure of the matrix present within Earth, the structure of the first chakra, and, as a consequence, the structure of the Buddhic body, determines everything in your life, the kind of health you will have, the kind of fertility, and the kind of rights you will hold over the resources of this world. This includes material resources, though not in the sense of finances or money, but rather the wealth and prosperity that come from nature. All of this is given precisely at the level of Earth. Its structure is not uniform. And if you have cleansed the earth element many times, you've probably noticed that with each deeper cleansing, after a while, you find yourself immersed in slightly different realms. You've noticed that, haven't you? It's not always the same level. Although we say that everyone belongs to their own realm, this only applies when a person does nothing with their consciousness. In such a case, they are indeed rooted at that specific point, connected with others at that point, and do not move any further. However, when a person begins performing cleansings, expanding their consciousness and the conductivity of their inner forces, and when the inner strength of their consciousness grows, their existential volume also increases. The heavier and greater this existential volume becomes, the deeper the person will be able to immerse into certain layers. And now, the time has come to talk about these layers, what they are, why we previously had no opportunity to descend to the lower ones, and why we do now. All legends and occult methodologies that work with this energy, with memory as a general force, and with specific types of memory, such as reincarnational memory and bloodline memory, all describe how this memory is accessed not through space, but specifically through Earth. It is Earth that receives our bones, as well as the bones of our parents and ancestors. And it is Earth that preserves the memory of everything that has ever existed in this world. Absolutely everything, without exception. In this regard, Greek mythology most vividly reflects this particular quality of Earth as a storehouse of memory. The myths speak in great detail about Earth and her goddesses, with this theme running like a red thread through all Greek myths and legends. The very first layer with which we attempt to make contact is the layer of nature, the layer of life-giving nature, which, at the level of the 3 circles on the elemental cross, is marked by the inner circle of the proto-foundations: love, hate, life, and death. This is the so-called layer of Demeter, the goddess of fertility. And there are a great many myths and legends about her. If we analyze them from the correct perspective, from the point of view of the goddess's function, it becomes clear that in essence, this goddess performs the filtration function. When a person or any living being completes its existence here and passes through the stage of death, it is Demeter who carries out her foremost task, separating the human soul, mind, and body into distinct parts. Afterwards, each part follows its own path. You know, it's rather like a good housekeeper boning a chicken. Everything goes to its proper place. The flesh, which Demeter takes, becomes food for her children. That is her role, to provide nourishment. Her children need to eat. And it doesn't matter what kind of food it is. That's why Earth consumes all biological matter, everything of a biological nature, absorbing it effortlessly. This is precisely why Earth is closely connected to fire, because fire shares the same nature. Fire also consumes all biological matter, and, if it chooses, non-biological matter too. However, Demeter cannot absorb non-biological matter. So, once she separates the flesh from the bones, which preserve memory, remain within her. Our pure memory and genetics are separated from the flesh, from all those fleeting things, emotions, experiences, passing thoughts, and interests. From the planet's perspective, human life is merely a fleeting occurrence. Thus, all of this falls away, just as it falls away from us. Only a single framework remains, a basis, a foundation. What endures is a structure weighty enough to rest upon the surface of Demeter. And it is this very framework, your primary structure, that begins to shift down to a lower level, as though it has grown heavier, as though the existential volume has freed itself from the ties that once held it back. Now it concentrates entirely into a single element which, like a stone, begins to descend. The second level of Earth is the one that, in Greek mythology, belongs to the goddess Ryakibella. She is the very goddess who preserves memory within herself, all memory, without exception. She possesses a particularly interesting quality. When she absorbs something, she never destroys it entirely. She does not try to make everything uniform. Instead, she assigns each block of memory, each informational cluster, its own rightful place, but only on the condition that this memory block can be informationally linked with all the other memories she holds. Am I explaining this clearly? She systematizes it all. Yes, she connects everything without destroying it, which is essential. She preserves each memory in its original, unspoiled form. She links everything together, everything that departs from this world, and everything that is no longer needed in the present moment, like bones, which are not needed now, but still carry memory. And this memory may one day be needed again, therefore it must be preserved until the right moment arrives. The level of possibilities belonging to Ryakibella is associated with the second circle of the proto-foundations, specifically the proto-foundation evil, which becomes a source of difficulty for those who misunderstand it. But for those who grasp its true nature, as we are gradually beginning to, it becomes clear that evil is simply information not currently required, yet which must be preserved until its time comes. What is regarded as evil today may, for example, cease to be evil tomorrow, when Mercury shifts its position, and instead becomes something good. For this reason, it is best to leave all this memory untouched. Leave it until the appropriate time, neither disturbing nor diminishing it. It has already been cleansed of flesh, the framework, the foundation has been extracted. It does not decay, it does not spoil, it preserves absolute information within itself. In the same way, your mind, your existential volume, your karma zero lens, your consciousness structure, concentrated on the current of Earth, after cleansing, becomes able to reach the level where a place has been made for it. There, having descended to this level, we begin to exchange information with other informational structures. Because Ryakibella's requirement is to connect everything into a single web, everything must be linked to everything else. At this level, reincarnational memory is restored, though mainly, of course, it is bloodline memory. And if you've cleansed yourself properly, then at some point you must have experienced moments of connection with your bloodline and its memory. Moments when you feel an urge to know something, or sudden insights such as, I know this, I remember this, I've seen this before, and yet I couldn't possibly have seen it. It happened in the previous century. Still, I know it, I remember it. This is not schizophrenia. These are entirely real experiences. This is what is known as complete bloodline memory, when, layer by layer, level by level, we connect with the memory of our ancestors. One can reach this state only through a sufficiently heavy existential volume, which, in fact, is precisely what you are gradually acquiring. If you have achieved this, that's excellent. If not, then you must strive to attain this effect. It is the minimum requirement for the growth of your consciousness in the future, the minimum, but an essential one, because complete memory is a necessary and sufficient condition for human consciousness to begin its transition from the level of the warrior caste to that of the ruling caste. Possessing a long bloodline memory is a mandatory requirement for the ruling caste. Reincarnational memory, on the other hand, is of a different nature. It is stored not so much within the realm of Rhea, but rather within the realm of her mother, Gaia. This is the very first outer layer, the layer of elemental forces. And the same Greek myths tell us that Gaia, in giving birth to her children, kept them dwelling within herself. And these are the primordial elements, the proto-foundations, the primary principles that were once born, and which, even if only in minimal measure, exist within the consciousness of every human being. However, one can reach them only if one's mind and existential volume become sufficiently heavy to permit passage to this level. Meaning it requires immense experience and great inner strength. This level is essential for setting out upon the path of magic. And here, the necessary and sufficient condition is the awakening of one's reincarnational memory. From the warrior caste, there are two paths. One leads towards magic, and the other towards rulership. Bloodline memory is not so important for a mage, because a mage can be born of practically anyone. Just look at Merlin. According to the Christian version, he was born of a nun and a demon. The Welsh version claims he was born of a king's daughter and a god, which, from the perspective of Christian morality, is basically the same thing. In other words, his origins were such that, frankly, it would have been better not to mention them at all. And believe me, most who follow the path of magic don't exactly have noble lineage either. That sort of pedigree is crucial only for those who walk the path of the ruler. There, yes, purity of blood and noble origins are truly essential, but magic chooses itself. The effect, and the necessary condition, for following the second path, the path of awakening reincarnational memory, is an existential volume so heavy that it is no longer bound or restricted by anything. This is what enables a person to reach the level of the proto-foundation dark. It is precisely there that all of Gaia's firstborn dwell. Those who are the primal cause behind the creation of absolutely everything in this world. According to legend, they were so monstrous, terrifying, and uncontrollable that their father, Uranus, preferred to force them back into Gaia's body, simply so he would never have to see them again. Well, it all ended rather badly for Uranus. Although he did manage to leave his mark on the world in the form of Aphrodite, he also fathered Cronus, who ultimately destroyed him. Cronus, the husband of Rhea Kybele, devoured his own children, demonstrating that memory, the creation of Rhea, and everything that takes place in this world must be preserved within time. After all, Cronus is the god of time. Everything must be preserved within time. That is, it must have existed here in reality at some point, so that when the moment is right, this information can be retrieved and transferred from the Proto-Foundation evil to the Proto-Foundation tradition. In this way, evil ceases to be evil. It transforms tradition and compels people, and all those living within the inner circle, to act and live differently. And this is not a source of chaos, as one might assume. Rather, it is a new opportunity for old algorithms, those that once failed to be implemented, but which now receive a second wind, so to speak. And if we look at the reality around us, such examples are easy to find. There was the Soviet Union, and there was Stalin. He was blamed for every conceivable sin and portrayed as the greatest villain and executioner of the 20th century. Yet only a short time has passed since the 1960s. When exactly was the cult of personality denounced? In 57, 56, or 55? In any case, about 50 years have gone by, and what do we see? How swiftly things change. The wind is now blowing in a completely different direction. Now it seems he is no longer a murderer or a tyrant, but a brilliant leader who achieved vital things for the state, who defended the country. You see how quickly the narrative shifts. The villain is no longer a villain. He is being re-evaluated so that his program, his algorithm for controlling events, his algorithm for shaping reality, may be transferred from the Proto-Foundation evil, where it truly belonged, into the Proto-Foundation tradition, and thereby become traditionally acceptable. You see, this happens everywhere. Napoleon Bonaparte was once regarded as evil and was exiled, yet when chaos once again overtook France, they remembered him and brought him back. The same thing occurs with many historical figures. At first, they are vilified, and then they are granted a second chance to reclaim what is necessary. But it is not the individuals themselves who are given this second chance. It is their archetypes, their informational structures. These are self-sufficient, whole, complete, and weighty enough to have reached the realm of Ria Kibela and preserved themselves there. And what matters is that they remain unchanged. All emotions, such as hatred and love, dissolve into the body of Demeter. If you make your consciousness so heavy that passage into the body of Gaia, that is, the Proto-Foundation dark, becomes sufficiently free, reincarnational memory begins to awaken. Naturally, this follows the awakening of bloodline memory. And if you have already begun to experience this, then more intensive work with the elements will bring you closer to this effect, provided that you set such a goal for yourself. This is a direct contact with the primordial forces, those very first forces who are, in essence, the keepers of the elements, their natural carriers. And in truth, each person has their own natural carrier, their own guiding patron, their own dominant element. This is especially true for those who walk the path of magic and reach this level. Here in the dark dwell the Earth Titans, the Fire Titans, the Water Titans, and the Air Titans. All these ancient forces residing there offer you their own specific, uninterrupted source of energy. But to reach that point, I repeat, your consciousness must be free. Your internal channel of perception must expand instantaneously, and the capacity of your consciousness to receive this energy must be extremely high. To reach this state, you must free yourself from everything that drains your energy, from connections that are no longer necessary, from fears you have already cleansed, and those you are still in the process of cleansing. Moreover, you must rid yourself of the inability and the unwillingness to embrace the elements. It is precisely this impossibility that we must now work to overcome. And how will we do this? Quite simply, Until now, we have only partially immersed ourselves in the various elements. We have cleansed them. We have reached an agreement with our subconscious that it will be ready to work with the elements, that it is prepared to perceive them. In other words, it has come to understand that contact with elemental forces does not lead to destruction, that there is no physical danger, but this alone is not enough. Our consciousness must mutate under the influence of particular elements. It must transform. It must change of its own accord. And mutation occurs only when the body or consciousness remains immersed in an element for an extended period of time. This means we need a tool, a means of immersing ourselves in the element and remaining there. Our task, our purpose, in immersing ourselves in the earth element is to allow our consciousness to attune so deeply to earth that it begins to move downward of its own accord, lower and lower. At each level, we will experience distinct effects. This is not a descent in a lift, but rather a gradual immersion down a staircase, where at every step we adapt to a new energy. The deeper we go, the denser and heavier the frequencies become. Low frequencies are poorly perceived by the subconscious. The human mind is not attuned to them. These low frequencies often cause panic and states of altered perception of reality. This is why immersion into earth must be gradual. First, we will notice physical effects, then social effects, and only afterward the internal, deeper effects of contact with the earth element. Naturally, earth is of great importance. It is one of the first elements a person comes into contact with. Essentially, if a person falls within the sphere of Earth's influence, then, as has already been said, everything in their life will begin to align. But sometimes, a person does not find themselves in that sphere. At times, one becomes so detached from their own roots that Earth simply ceases to perceive them at all. In their place, the Earth sees an entirely empty space, and nature, as you know, abhors a vacuum, so it will certainly fill that empty space with someone else. Thus, people who have no contact with the Earth are unable to find their place in life. They cannot find a place to live, or a place within life itself, and because they cannot draw power from Earth, they often suffer from various health problems. A clear sign of this disconnection is problems with the legs. The legs are the first to signal the body's inability to draw in energy. It feels as if the tissue has gone numb, like roots that have lost the ability to absorb sap. When leg problems begin, it is a deeply troubling sign. And if these problems are generational, passed down through the bloodline, it suggests that your lineage has committed something so grave upon this earth that the earth itself rejects you and refuses to bear you within its space. But even if you immerse yourself only in the first layer, the very first descent into the realm of Demeter, you immediately gain access to your totem. Whether it is an animal, bird, tree, or creeping creature, it does not matter. Every person has their own totem. And we have already attempted to touch upon this and explore it. But the totem is not connected to reincarnation. More often, it is a symbol representing a bloodline or tribe. So if you have succeeded in establishing contact with your totem, it means you have come very close to the level of Rhea. It is she who bestows this memory, the memory of the bloodline. This means you must go even deeper, and the effect you will experience will be truly remarkable, because according to the law of Earth, the one who carries a long ancestral memory holds the right to rule upon it. Ancient legends, especially Celtic and Irish ones, tell us that before a person could become a ruler, a king, a sovereign over any given land, they first had to enter into a ritual marriage with that land. In other words, they entered into a ritual union with the goddess of Earth herself. There was a specific rite for this, and it was not particularly aesthetic. You can read about it yourself if you wish. It involved boiling a mare in water, but beyond the ritual itself, A mandatory condition for gaining the right to become Earth's husband was the impeccability of one's ancestors over the previous 3 generations. The principle of ancestral impeccability was of vital importance. One had to not only know their lineage across 3 generations, but also be absolutely certain that each ancestor had lived an impeccable life and achieved certain accomplishments. Immersion at this level gives you the opportunity to move further, but if you have not passed through the layer of Rhea, you will not be able to reach the layer of Gaia. Therefore, it is essential to carry out regular cleansings and remain immersed in the element. In doing so, your consciousness will gradually begin to mutate. Little by little, it will start to recall certain things. The Karma Zero lens, which I have already mentioned, contains information about all the proto-foundations. This means that as we immerse ourselves in Earth, we awaken the proto-foundations themselves, not the connections between them. The way in which these proto-foundations are connected is determined by fire. Fire can link them however it pleases, not necessarily in the way they should be connected. As a result, some proto-foundations become filled with information, while others do not. Some are filled by egregores, while others remain untouched. This means that your existential volume will not increase in the way you need. It will increase according to the demands of the egregorial environment, the very environment that predetermined these connections. When we immerse ourselves in the Earth, we deactivate these connections. We begin to fill the proto-foundations not as the egregorial environment desires, but in accordance with nature, where evil is precisely the evil we discussed today, not harm done to others, but unsuccessful programs for achieving results. And these are 2 entirely different concepts in magic and in everyday life. However, here we are speaking of the magical, the occult component. And if the proto-foundations are filled in a different way, this will allow you to increase your existential volume and deepen the weight of your consciousness.